coolest ending to a game. You've got your last-minute field goals. You've got your walk-off home runs. You've got your buzzer beaters. And Tyson Ewing got to call a buzzer beater in a rivalry game, no less.
Game clock down to 12. Here's Delaney Gibb on the right side, crossing back to her left from her right. Driving, losing the basketball, stolen away. Maddie Wilkie with 4, down to 2. She'll heave at the buzzer. She got it! She got it! Maddie Wilkie buries it from 45 feet, and Utah wins the rivalry game!
Oh, yes.
So good.
So good.
And Tyson, here's the funny little inside baseball for you. Your boy was producing.
Oh, really?
We had some people out of town, so the boss had to step in and run the board.
Okay, well done.
And so right after, Miley Rustand, his great color analyst, goes, "I'm sorry, I just screamed." She's thinking she just ruined his call. You can't hear her scream, which is good. It doesn't ruin the call at all. Maybe you hear it as part of the many screams in the background.
Yeah, like the crowd noise-ish,
right?
yeah.
And Tyson's like, "I don't even know what I said." So I tell him, they're saying, that probably wasn't very good. I told him, no, it was great. I'll play it here in a sec, going into the post-game show, right? And I said, Tyson, you just screamed what happened. It was perfect.
It was a great call.
It was an incredible call. So we're going to have Tyson on, and he's heard it now a number of times, no doubt. So hopefully he's still not feeling insecure about his call. It was all-time great Utah women's basketball moment, and I think an all-time great call by our guy Tyson Ewing.
Yeah, he did a great job. And Maddie Wilkie, who's been a guest on the show, obviously, there's phenomenal. We love Maddie Wilkie. Maddie Wilkie is not like the final shot. You don't design the final play. You don't draw it up so that Maddie Wilkie gets the last shot.
Yeah, it's a broken play that ended up in her hands. Broken play for BYU, turnover that she ends up with. And another awesome thing, in the post-game interview, she drops to Tyson. She drops we practice half-court shots.
Yeah.
To Tyson.
Okay.
Like, we practice that in shoot-around. So
yeah.
I just was like,
okay,
I've done this before. Let me just throw it up, see what happens.
Okay,
she does this, like, too cool for school. Yeah, we practiced that, which was
Maddie.
Incredible.
All right, Maddie.
Love it.
Like, yeah, I totally knew that was going to go in. No, it was a half-court shot, rivalry game, like the whole thing. That is cinema. That is high drama in college sport. That is why you love it. So looking forward to that conversation. And we'll play the highlight probably a few more times on the show because I love the highlight. I love the voice cracking. I love the excitement. Hometown radio, that's something that you get on your home of the Utes, ESPN 792.1 FM. All right. It was a big weekend competitively. You had Utah Hockey Club in action. You had Utes in action, running Ute basketball on the men's and the women's side. Obviously, a lot to get to. But something is happening right now in college sports. Again, college football. I'm not going to spend your time on spring ball today. Okay, we've got 17 days before Utah's spring practices begin. BYU is already doing theirs. They're a good roster right now. They don't have as many questions that need to be answered, and BYU's feeling pretty good about things. So congratulations to Kalani Sitake coming off a big season. I guess the biggest thing they got to worry about right now is the mild stirring of bad PR after the Salt Lake Tribune article came out last week. But again, the ground underneath college sports shakes every offseason, and even sometimes right up to the season. And the season itself, thank all the powers that be, settles it down and we actually get to focus on the competition. All the hand-wringing, all the fretting, the sweaty palmedness over, oh, my gosh, they're ruining college sports. I can't stand this. Why are they ruining college sports for us? It hasn't been ruined yet when they actually blow the whistle, kick the thing off, and we get rolling. Thank goodness it hasn't been ruined just yet. Does it look different? Yeah. Is it altered in a way that makes it perhaps less appealing? Sure. Ruined, though, would be a massive overstatement, and we're not going to support ruined as a narrative here. But again, the changing landscape starts its little off-season wiggle. And this is actually a ripple that first got stirred up, I don't know, 2 years ago now, I believe. And I'm talking about the battle going on in the SEC, and particularly the big brands of, the ACC, the big brands of the ACC wanting to get out of the grant of rights that was signed all the way through 2036. You've heard this story before. The ACC you can't get out of the ACC without penalty until, I don't know, 2036. My 5-year-old daughter will have graduated high school or will be graduating high school. Like, that is a lifetime away. And I don't know how many college football lifetimes away that is, but it's a lot. So the ACC, and particularly Miami, Clemson, North Carolina, Florida State, these teams have been like, guys, we cannot be beholden to this. That is too long. Even though they signed it in the first place, buyer's remorse, regret on signing that thing. And the lawsuits began this time-ish last year. The conversation about it began with the stirrings of conference realignment with the USC and the UCLA departure. And now the ACC, Clemson, Florida State are reportedly closing in on a settlement to the lawsuits that those two universities brought against the conference, trying to get themselves out. So what does that actually look like? And what is actually going to change? And why am I starting a show in Salt Lake City talking about things that might be happening in the ACC? Well, because nothing happens in a vacuum in college football, and the ACC and the Big 12 are in very, very similar spots from a stability standpoint. BYU and Utah obviously competing in the Big 12 conference. The Pac-12, the reconstituted Pac-12, I guess, has some sort of involvement here, but far less, at least at this point. Florida State and Clemson brought these lawsuits, and on Tuesday, they're expected to vote on an agreement that will settle a total of 4 lawsuits between Florida State, Clemson, and the ACC. Now, Miami, North Carolina, some of these other teams are watching very, very closely and poised to bounce and strike and take advantage of whatever moment is created if these lawsuits were successful for Florida State and Clemson and they were able to break the grant of rights. They were able to avoid the $120 million penalty looming if they decided to leave the ACC early. That isn't going to happen. And you have to credit, I guess, the ACC leadership for reading the room and saying, guys, we do not, I heard Scott Mitchell talking about this on his show. We do not want to suffer the same fate that the Pac-12 suffered. We cannot dig in our heels so hard that we go the way of the dodo the same way the Pac-12 did. And please don't text me and say, no, the Pac-12 still exists, OC. The Pac-12 is still around. You know what I'm talking about. The meaningful version of the Pac-12 is dead. It's gone. It's not going to be the same thing, presumably ever again. The only thing that could resurrect the Pac-12 is actually the fullness of this entire cycle going to super conferences and a Pac-12 being reconstituted as a division in a super conference, probably with the same teams that were already in the Pac-12, which is silliness of the highest order. But that's the only thing that would make me talk about the Pac-12 in a meaningful way. Sorry, Utah State fans, even if your Aggies end up winning the Pac-12 conference, I'm going to have a hard time taking it seriously. I will applaud the effort, but I'm going to have a hard time celebrating it like it's the same thing as when Utah won the Pac-12, or when USC won the Pac-12, or when Stanford was dominating in the Pac-12, or when Oregon beat Utah for a Pac-12 championship. I'm not going to be able to talk about it the same way. But the ACC has finally, leadership in college football has looked at what has happened and read the tea leaves based on the history of what has happened and said, all right, we can't let Florida State and Clemson become Jimmy Butler. We can't let Florida State and Clemson be so disgruntled.
That is a great reference by you.
That they're eventually gone.
We love it. We love the ACC for a long time, but now we're really mad, and you can't console us. Yeah,
That's right.
Don't become Jimmy Butler.
That's Florida State and Clemson are trying to be Jimmy Butler, and the ACC is trying not to be the Miami Heat. See what I'm doing here? I'm tying college into the NBA current storylines.
Just weaving it
through. Just braiding it together,
like
James.
An artist. But, not a host, he's an artist, folks.
But what this settlement means for the Big 12, what this settlement means for Utah and for BYU is that there is a power league, and we're still calling them a power league. We know that even the power leagues are now split into two. There's the SEC and the Big 10 at the top, and right now it's Big 10 at the top, and then SEC very close behind. And beyond that, I think it's the Big 12 and ACC vying for that 3 spot. The ACC is trying to cement itself there by keeping its most valuable brands. And how do you keep your most valuable brands? Well, sometimes the unfortunate reality is you have to kowtow to the demands of those influential brands. And the ACC pulled off what seems like, as long as this settlement is agreed upon, and all reports are indicating that will happen as soon as tomorrow, the ACC pulled off a successful negotiation and said, Florida State, Clemson, let's drop these lawsuits. Let's get this out of the way. Let's keep everybody happy. What do you guys need? And the answer is we want unequal distribution. Now, this is a fascinating experiment because we know that there's already a line of demarcation between the haves and the have-nots in college sports. And the presumed outcome of unequal distribution of the economic returns from things like your television revenue deal should only widen that gap. Likely will only widen that gap. But what does it actually look like? We don't know. I mean, we kind of know because the unequal distribution right now is on a conference-by-conference basis. Big 10 and SEC are not equal to the ACC and the Big 12, and they weren't equal to the Pac-12, and that's why the Pac-12 died, and that's why teams in the Pac-12 wanted to be part of the unequal big brother in the Big 10, and that's what killed the whole thing. And we know all that. I'm not going to spend too much time reciting and reiterating some math whiz, all right? $100 million, 40% of that is going to be distributed, as it always has been, equally among the member institutions of the ACC. Not to include, at this point, Stanford, SMU, and Cal, because part of their invitation to the ACC was that they would take reduced shares, and in SMU's case, to take nothing. I want to be part of your club so bad you don't even have to pay me. I want to work so bad for Nike you don't have to give me a salary. I just want the employee discount. That's what SMU did.
And they almost won the conference.
I have a rich dad.
They got within a few seconds of winning the conference that way.
I have a rich dad, so I don't need to worry about my salary. I just want the experience of working for Google. Like, that's what SMU did.
And for 7 years, isn't it 7 years before they get any of the revenue sharing? We didn't see any news about this, but I said at the time, I hope that they got whatever share the ACC, or half of the share the ACC got from the playoffs. I hope that they threw some of that to SMU, because Clemson was in too, so maybe not the full share of the playoff money, from media playoff money, but like give them half of that share. I hope that they at least got that, if SMU, or at least I hope SMU is asked for it at the very least. I mean, they earned that for the ACC.
They did, and I wonder how that's going to be handled. I assume that at some point there are rich and powerful enough boosters at SMU that just for the optics want to be like, hey, make them give us some of that. If we earn it for the conference, make them give us our fair share of that. And I don't know how the commissioner will handle it, but in any case, 40%, okay, so 40% of your total pie is given in equal slices. All right? Welcome. Thanks for coming to our ACC football season potluck, everyone gets an equal piece of pie on 40% of our distribution. And, those schools like, oh, cool. Well, thanks, guys. I'm NC State. I'm happy. I like this. Okay, that's cool. Thanks, guys.
So that's 40% split up. Is it 16 ways?
Well, I think it's 13 ways, right?
13
because Stanford, Cal, and SMU.
SMU. So 13 ways. Okay.
Okay. And then the other 60%, so more than half of the pie, is now going to be distributed based on television ratings, based on popularity. And that's where this experiment gets really fascinating. Because as far as this article is telling me, the brand initiative based on television ratings takes 60% and slices up the pie, the rest of the pie, that 60% of the pie, based on how popular you are, how many eyeballs you draw. So SMU, in this case, did not have the same television ratings as Clemson did. Clemson, if SMU was even entitled to a share, Clemson would still get more, whether or not SMU is the better team. There's no competitive language here. There's no, well, if Florida State is the best team, they get the most money. This is all television ratings money. And that is why the experiment is so interesting to me, because it is a popularity contest. If you expand this model to the Big 12 conference, right? Who gets the most money? Who is the number one ratings draw in the Big 12 right now?
Do you have the answer?
It's Colorado.
Is it Colorado? Well, yeah. I should have known.
Colorado.
I should have known before you said that. Yeah. I was thinking like, oh, is it ASU? They want to know. Obviously, Dion and his team.
Yes. And so I'm glad you brought up ASU. ASU, a notorious awful performer in television ratings, going all the way back to the Pac-8. They don't it is a regional team. How many Arizona State fans are living in Florida right now? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now,
and Phoenix is a pretty big media market, but it's not enough to make the ratings, get them the ratings jump that they would need in this scenario.
So this, again, expected to be signed tomorrow. This model, 60% of television revenue is distributed based on a formula attached to television ratings. And, of course, they're going to incorporate things like digital streams and how many people tune in and download the ESPN Plus broadcast or whatever. And then, of course, the 40%, so less than half of your television revenue is doled out on an equal share basis. This is either going to be wonderful or completely disastrous. For Florida State and Clemson, who agreed to this and like this because right now they do well in television ratings, it could be worth as much as an extra $10 to $15 million per year.
Wow.
Now, that's big money.
Yeah, that's not nothing.
That's important for all of the reasons we've been talking about for years now. Coaching salary pool, NIL opportunity, facilities, all of these things. It costs a lot of money. Do you know how much it cost Texas to beat Texas football this year? Did you see their number?
I missed it.
$325 million of operating expenses.
And what? $150 million is having Matthew McConaughey as their mascot, right?
Now for Texas, Texas football brought in $330-something million. So they're still profitable. But can you imagine, James, running a team, running a college football program, and you bring in $338 million, and you're just like, I am Scrooge McDuckin through this big pile of money. And then everyone's just like, well, hold on. You got to pay Sark. He's $10 million a year. That's fine. I got $330-something million. That's fine. It's cool. It's fine. It's all right. You got to pay his assistant coaching pool. It's another $10 million a year. That's fine.
Still over $300 million.
I'm still north of $300 million. All right. Well, got to keep the lights on. You got to distribute this revenue to the rest of the athletic program. Utility bill. You got to
I have wondered.
You got
just a quick tangent. I have wondered how much utility bills on stadiums alone have got to be. It's got to be insane.
I
right?
have no
Just
idea.
like you say, we say keep the lights on as a expression around here, but seriously, keeping the lights on is probably really expensive for these stadiums.
Can we do a little on-air producing right now?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, well, let's try to book the Delta Center facilities manager, like who knows the answer to that question.
Yeah.
And the Rice-Eccles Stadium as well.
Yeah.
So someone who can actually tell us how much it costs to keep the lights on.
Just the lights.
Yeah.
For one stadium.
So Texas brought in $330-something million, and then at the end of the day, they paid out $325. And so they're like, you can now Scrooge McDuck your way through $9 million. It's like, what? What? For real? Sorry, Arch Manning is here, so you got to give him some money. You know, and like, good for Texas. To be profitable in college sports, awesome. There's a lot of big businesses that have revenue that's in the hundreds of millions of dollars that are still in the red, that are not profitable. And there are a lot of college football programs, including this last year at the University of Utah. There's a lot of athletic departments that are in the red year over year. That happens, right? And right now in the ACC, that line is going to get more pronounced because the popular teams are going to take money away from the less popular teams. So the gap within the ACC conference is going to widen. It's an experiment that is being agreed upon because this is what keeps the ACC intact for now. Now, the last thing on this that I want to talk about, the last part of this agreement that is expected to be ratified tomorrow that makes less sense for me. It makes total sense that the ACC powers that be are just like, look, it sucks to do the unequal revenue distribution thing, but we got to do it or they're going to be gone. They're definitely going to leave us one way or another. Or they're going to win one of these cases if we don't. There's 4 different lawsuits. We might win 3. They might win 1. And the ability for them to leave is going to be catastrophic for us. The same way USC and UCLA departing proved to be catastrophic for the Pac-12 conference. So we will do what we have to do to keep these folks around, even for the short term. Keep them around. But part of this agreement also is that the buyout got reduced. $120 million per exit was the previous agreement. If you wanted, as North Carolina, you want to get out, you want to go join the Big Ten, you got to pay $120 million, or somebody has to help you pay $120 million. You got to let private equity come in, or whatever it is.
Maybe Bill Belichick can help him pay $120 million.
He's got it laying around. But here's the thing. Part of this agreement is that $120 million is now going to come down, according to Pete Thamel, is going to come down to under $100 million.
Oh.
So the exit fee gets reduced. So the big boys that want out now get more money for being in, but also don't have to pay quite as much money to get out if they want to.
That's still what your exit fee is still more than, say, the Big Ten, which has the biggest per school revenue share, right?
Okay.
So that's still more than what you'd get for your share each year, but you're talking about year over year, you're making that $100 million back.
But if you're Florida State, right? And somebody says to you, "Hey man, you can go be part of the SEC, but it's going to cost you. How much is it going to cost you?" I want to go to the SEC. How much is that going to cost me? Well, according to this new agreement, it's going to cost you about as much as you paid Jimbo Fisher. You're like, what?
They're probably still finishing off that buyout, right?
You're like,
Jimbo Fisher.
You're like, I could get to the SEC for the same price as I paid that yahoo?
Yeah.
And it's actually, I'm exaggerating here. It was Texas A&M that had the big figure on Jimbo Fisher.
Oh, right.
But still, Florida State, like, these are schools that are paying. How much does Dabo make in a year? $10 million? You can get to the SEC, or you can have a decade of Dabo. Which are you going to choose? There's nobody in the world that would rather have Dabo than SEC. There's not the most hardcore. Dabo's own kids would be like, well, Clemson, we got to go to SEC. So
Sorry, Dad. We got to go to the SEC.
This is what I'm still trying to figure out. How does that make sense for you to increase the revenue, getting them closer to the goal, the financial goal they have to have enough money to potentially buy themselves out, and also reducing the buyout? It's like,
where's the win for the ACC?
Well, the win for the ACC
is that they stick around, but
is
still
they. You know when you ever watched somebody on monkey bars? You know how when your grip starts to get bad,
yeah,
you're like, and you re-grip, you pull yourself back up. That's what they just did.
Yeah,
they just re-gripped.
They're still hanging in.
They're hanging by like the fingertips were extending and they were about to fall, and they pulled that one little And now what it's going to take to save the SEC is that old movie trope of they let go and then suddenly some strong arm reaches down and grabs them and lifts them up.
Yeah,
I don't know where that's coming from. Like Notre Dame is the only possibility, but there's no motivation for Notre Dame to do that.
Merger with the new Pac-12. Strong. It would be, and that would be truly the Any Coast Conference, ACC.
Here's the deal. Scott Mitchell said, "If I'm Brett Yormark, I'm trying to buy out these teams. I'm trying to add them to the Big 12 conference, but you can't. The Big 12 doesn't have an extra $200 million laying around, even though the buyout got reduced." The Big 12 doesn't have it. Unless they do bring in Saudi Arabia, they bring in private equity firms, and he's a creative fundraiser. But does adding Clemson, Florida State, Miami, whomever from the ACC make the Big 12 untouchable by the powers that be, by the Big 12 and by the Big 10 and by the SEC? Still no.
Yeah, honestly, it kind of resets them back to when they had Texas and Oklahoma. It almost it almost puts them there, which they weren't untouchable.
They were not untouchable.
Like you add, and ironically, they're the same colors. You have the maroon of Oklahoma and Florida State, and you have the orange of Clemson and Texas. But that Texas and Oklahoma leaving, yes, they brought in Utah, which is a great on-field performer, but we all know not quite the national brand, right? They're still a developing national brand. BYU, developing national brand, right? Like you don't have, that was the big thing, is now you have no national brands in your conference. So you bring in Clemson and Florida State, for example, if you were able to scrounge up that buyout money, you have two national brands again, and then a bunch of other developing / non-national brands underneath them. But that's what you were a couple years ago with Texas and Oklahoma, and they still left. You're just a bunch more teams than you were when you had Texas and Oklahoma. So it would make everyone feel better, but long term, I'm not sure that it saves the Big 12, like you said, from their teams being poached by Big 10 and SEC.
If the buyout for these teams is now less than $100 million and they're each getting an extra $15 million a year, they're looking at it and they're going, okay, how long between now and 2037? All right, we got about 10 years, and we can pay for that, and we can buy ourselves out a couple years early if we have to, or more likely 5 years of this revenue, and then we can borrow the rest and we can get out. I mean, is this a model that you think the Big 12 conference should adopt, will eventually adopt? We'll get to that eventually on the show. We got to take a break, talk some bracketology next. The best in the business, Jerry Palm, is going to join us on the other side. It's the Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM.
Back out front to Gabe. Gabe's going to drive, kick it back to Mike. Right side three again. Got it again. Bullseye. Utah leads.
That was the Shark, Mike Sherjamps. He was able to hit a three on Saturday's big win over Arizona State. 99-73. Running Utes get back in the win column. They really needed it. That was Bill Riley on the call. Josh Eilert, interim head coach. First win as the Utah head coach. It'll be West Virginia tomorrow night. That's senior night. We'll have it for you right here on the home of the Utes, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Unfortunately, Utah basketball not going to be part of March Madness, but here to talk some bracketology on your home of the Utes, Jerry Palm, CBS Sports, best in the biz. Jerry, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
Doing all right. We're getting to the wild time of year that everyone's so looked forward to. We have not yet filled out our brackets because we don't have real brackets just yet. But how set
have
is
to wait for that?
Yeah, how set is this thing from now until we actually get our selection Sunday? Like, how much movement you think we're going to see still?
Oh, you'll definitely see. First of all, shuffling around the cut line because you've got I don't know, easily dozen teams that could still play their way in or out. And it's because at that part of the bracket, teams are a lot more alike. And I mean, they're alike sometimes in different ways, but in just terms of quality, there's very little difference in quality among those teams around the cut line. So every game can, for those teams, can change things. And then, of course, seeding is still in play as well. I mean, Auburn's almost locked up the overall number one, and Duke, barring some sort of collapse, is going to be a number one seed. But the other two spots are still up for grabs, and there are 5 schools in play for that. So, and since at least 2 of them are SEC teams, 3 of them are SEC teams, you've still got chances for them to play each other, as well as Houston and Michigan State in play. So, yeah, there's still, and then all through the bracket, you see at least seed changes. But then you can still see teams playing in or out.
So Houston, the aforementioned Houston Cougars squad that we've seen a couple times for both BYU and for Utah, right now the class of the Big 12 Conference, how much in danger are they of not being a number one seed in your mind?
If they lose tonight, they won't be tomorrow. So it's that close, and then Kansas visits down there tonight. So yeah, they're far from a lock, but they're certainly in a good place. But the competition, like there's 5 teams competing for the last 2 spots on the top line. So, they're one of them, and they're the leader of the group at the moment, but it's still fragile.
The other Big 12 Cougars, BYU, about 45 minutes south of where I'm sitting right now, has played themselves off of the bubble. They're top 25 ranked.
On to and then off.
On to and then off. 8 seed right now. Is that where they probably sit even after Big 12 tournament play, I should say?
Well, give or take. I mean, they've won 6 in a row, which, by the way, I'm taking a little bit of credit for because I saw the last loss in person. I was at Cincinnati the last time they lost. And really, they didn't look anything like an NCAA tournament team in the second half of that game. But, boy, have they been hot ever since. So, yeah, I mean, if they continue to stay, that hot, they certainly have a chance to move up. Iowa State, you're at Iowa State. That probably win there moves you up. I don't know that Utah moves the needle much. But then you get into conference play, and it's a good league, so you've got chances for more quality wins. So, no, there's definitely some upward mobility. And, if they go in the tank here, as little time as you have left to go in the tank, they could go back down, but I don't think they're going to go out.
So when you look at the roster, when you look at BYU, and you have seen them in person, obviously, you've got Yegor Demin, you've got Richie Saunders, who is like the revelation of the conference for hell's sake this year. He's just been incredible. They got a couple of big body guys that can really make an impact on the boards and on the defensive side of the floor, especially. When you look at the makeup of Kevin Young's team, and this is, of course, pre-A.J. DeBonsa, is this a team that is constructed the way we see a lot of teams that can make deep runs, Final Four, Elite Eight runs? Do they have the component parts necessary to potentially, if they're firing on all cylinders, make it that deep?
Boy, that's probably asking a lot, and especially if they're seated in the middle of the bracket, because then you're playing, a 1 or a 2 before you even really get going. I would say that not this year. That would be a surprise. A Final Four type of run would be a surprise, especially given where they're likely to be in the bracket. But I guess you never know. The NCAA tournament has given us bigger surprises than that. But I think that if they get out of the first weekend, that's probably going to be considered successful.
Jerry Paul, my guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show, talking a little bracketology as the regular season winds down. Big 12 tournament right around the corner. The Arizona Wildcats, an old familiar foe from the Pac-12 days for the University of Utah, now in their new environs in the Big 12. As you look at it, still some basketball left to play. Have they settled in where you thought they would?
Well, I guess at the beginning of the season, I thought they'd be a little bit higher. I've got them as a 6, so that's the bottom of the top 25. Number 25 is the 7 seed. So I thought they'd be higher than that, and they could still, I guess, move up some, but I don't think they're going to get – I thought they'd be like a top 10 type of team preseason. I don't think they can get to that height and what little is left in the regular season. But, I thought they'd be a little better. I don't think it'd be wrong probably to call them a huge disappointment. I don't know how their fans feel about it.
Utah State, right around the corner from us also, just an hour and a half up the road in Logan. And they're firmly in this bracket right now. They've had a couple of bad losses back-to-back, though. You got the Boise State loss and then a 93-66 demolition on the road at the hands of the Colorado State Rams. What's going on with the Aggies right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have them on the bubble, but you can't really call them completely safe either because of the schedule that's left. They've got a sweep of San Diego State, which is good. They beat Boise at home, so that's a home and home split. They won at St. Mary's, the champion of the West Coast Conference, so that's good. The only bad loss, if you're not going to take margin into effect, is at Vegas. That's a team that's not a threat to make a tournament. Colorado State probably won't make the NCAAs, but they're a postseason level team. But yeah, that's you hate to have a road trip like that. They've got Air Force coming in. They lose to Air Force, now we have a problem. Because that's a game you just got to win. Losing to Air Force, now we've got a problem for Utah State. But they look like kind of what they were last year. I thought last year, I saw them because I was in Indianapolis, so I saw them their first 2 games, and they were an 8 seed and got stuck playing Purdue in the second round, and I thought they deserved a better seed and therefore a more manageable opponent in the second round. But I thought the Mountain West was generally disrespected last year, and that's a concern for me again this year. That the committee will undervalue the teams in this league, and if that's the case, then I don't know that Utah State will get any higher than I picked them for today.
A lot of the conference realignment is, of course, those decisions are made based on football, but of course basketball, it feels the side effect, and we certainly experienced that here at Utah and with the Pac-12 dying and teams being in the Big 12 conference now. How is it played out in basketball in your mind? Is the Big 12 conference, I know the SEC is killing it right now, but is the Big 12 conference more interesting right now because of Arizona being in it, for that matter? I'm not going to give Utah that credit just yet, but has conference realignment helped college basketball or hurt it?
I don't know. It might be neutral. It's just different. You've got the SEC and the Big Ten are enormous. The Big Ten is just ridiculous. The ACC is, I don't know. The ACC is down, but I don't think that has to do with realignment. The Big Ten and the SEC are better, but I'm not sure it has to do with realignment necessarily. These teams have added, some quality. It's in basketball as well as they have in football, but I just think that it ends up being neutral in the end, right? there's so many conference games, and someone's going to win one. And if you have a winner, you have a loser, and I don't know that there's overwhelming quality difference that any of these conferences that are now just enormous. The four major conferences, actually five in basketball, but Big East isn't involved in realignment. I don't see that I think it's kind of a zero-sum game.
Are you surprised at all, or what's your reaction to the fact that Craig Smith out before the regular season ended, and still no announcement made on who the next head coach at Utah is going to be?
Well, that part, the last part's not surprising. In-season firings are always a bit of a surprise, but I get, and Indiana's kind of done that as well. Although their coach is still there, they've announced he's not coming back. But I think that it's almost like an act of desperation. You're just trying to, salvage the season, or trying to get ahead of the coaching search carousel. But nobody's announcing a coach, unless you're promoting from within. Nobody's announcing a new coach in the middle of the season. All of that activity takes place, when the season's over. And if the coach that you're looking for is still playing, there's not a whole lot you can do to really get into the details of chasing that coach. I'm not surprised that they don't have a new coach yet, because I just don't think the coaching carousel really gets going until those coaches become available when their season ends.
I mean, as you're well aware, at one point Utah was firmly a basketball school. That landscape has certainly shifted. But how appealing is this job, you think, on the national landscape right now?
Well, it's a place they've won before, and you're in the Big 12. So, it depends. The attractiveness of the job is going to depend on the attractiveness or the amount of financial commitment the school is willing to make in terms of investing in coaches and players. Because, college basketball, college sports really is different now. With NIL in particular, you've got revenue, I guess, sharing, for lack of a better term, coming up. How much are schools willing to invest, not just in football, because everybody's going to be investing in football, but, the other sports as well. And that's going to be really what makes a job attractive right now, is how much are you willing to invest to be good.
Who out there on the landscape right now is willing to invest, I guess, a proportionately equal amount in basketball as they do in football? Or maybe I suppose there's schools that are not football powers, like maybe a UConn is willing to pour a lot more into basketball than they are into football.
Well, it costs more to run football, so the actual amount of money invested in football may be higher anyway.
Yeah,
sure. Just because you're talking about 80 players or whatever versus 12. But there are schools that are basketball, and you mentioned UConn, disproportionately may invest more in basketball. UConn football is not even in a major conference, so it's a different level of play versus, someone like, Utah or, my school, Purdue, is primarily a basketball school, but they like to be good at football, and they're going to invest in football. Indiana's job is open. Indiana has always been a primarily basketball school, but they had a great football season with a new coach. So, it's possible to, but Kansas is another one. Kansas football has always been kind of hit and miss, mostly miss. In fact, historically bad for a long time, but Kansas basketball has always been the flagship program there, and that may still be the case. But they're still going to have to invest quite a bit in football. But I think that they certainly want to be competitive at the very highest levels in basketball, so they will invest appropriately to maintain that space as well.
Jerry, I could pick your brain all day long. We'll cut you loose and appreciate your time as always. Talk again soon, all right?
All right, thanks.
Jerry Palm, bracketologist over at CBS Sports. He's right now got Utah State a 9, BYU with some upward mobility possible, but also, as he mentioned, potentially a downward slide, although they're hot right now. They're a number 8 seed, and Utah Valley University, a 14 seed in his latest bracket.
Yeah, they're first in the WAC right now, OC, and obviously the WAC is still a one big lead. So that's why they're as low as they are, a 14 seed, because UVU's got to win the WAC tournament in what they call WAC Vegas next week. The WAC they call at the
Is that what they call it?
That's what the WAC calls it, WAC Vegas. Yeah, so Grand Canyon is also right there. They could end up with the number 1 seed in the WAC tournament. So it's really one of those two teams. UVU, it would be their first NCAA tournament appearance. So we're all pulling for the Wolverines to make something happen in Vegas next week.
If they make it, you got to pull from Red Dawn. You got to pull the Wolverine sounder.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And we even get our guy Bryce Larson on the show, who's color analyst for the broadcast. Or UVU to
that'd be awesome,
talk about their first NCAA tournament appearance. But yeah, that's why UVU's on there right now. They're the ones, they would be the 1 seed, but they got to win their last 2 games to secure that 1 seed.
All right, I opened the show talking about this settlement the ACC and Florida State and Clemson are going to come to, and the revenue model introduced to potentially solve that case, to settle that dispute. 60% of revenue given to the most popular teams in a formula. They divide up 60% of the revenue based on popularity. They give 40% of the revenue based on the traditional equal shares model. I looked up the television ratings numbers for 2024 for the Big 12 Conference. I'm going to tell you, based on 2024, which Big 12 schools would get the most money and who would get the least if the Big 12 goes toward this kind of revenue distribution model. We'll get to that next in the Hot Lunch. It's the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Scott Mitchell's going to join us at noon. Coming up in about 5 minutes here. Tony Jones, talk a little Utah Jazz and NBA basketball. Tyson Ewing still set for 1 o'clock, voice of Utah women's basketball. All right, James, I spent a lot of time talking about the revenue distribution model that the ACC is going to have to settle on to keep Florida State happy, Clemson happy. They're also reducing the buyout number to less than $100 million. Previously, it was set at about $120. That is supposed to be signed tomorrow. That settlement is supposed to be signed tomorrow. 4 lawsuits going to go away. Presumably, the more popular brands in the ACC, Miami, Florida State, North Carolina, these teams benefit. Clemson, of course. If this was adopted in the Big 12, first of all, would you be supportive of that idea? That, look, right now, Houston football is getting the same amount of money that BYU and Utah are getting. Do they deserve that?
Would that be how it is distributed? I guess Colorado would be, if they do it ratings-wise, Colorado would be in that group too, get more money. Yeah, it's tougher with the Big 12 because, like I was saying the first segment, there's not a national brand. I mean, Colorado's a national brand now because of their head coach, but they won't be if and when Dion leaves. So I suppose yes, but it's harder to say which of those schools would be. We would like to think that Utah would be one of those teams. We'd like to think that BYU would, especially after the year they had last year. But it's tougher to identify which teams those would be. BYU and Utah might end up being one of the teams who get the equal revenue share.
So,
for all we know.
I pulled up the ratings. These are the television ratings for the Big 12 in 2024. Big 12 viewership for 12 games of the regular season. Doesn't include bowl games. Doesn't include Arizona State playing the college football playoff game. All right, right now, the teams that would benefit most from a popularity-based distribution model, of course, University of Colorado. University of Colorado dominated viewership in the Big 12 conference. They averaged almost 4 million viewers per game, 3.86 million viewers per game. The next closest, number 2, 1.38 million viewers per game. You want to take a guess as to which team in the Big 12 conference that was?
Was it Utah?
It was not. And it wasn't BYU.
It wasn't BYU. Iowa State.
It was Kansas State.
Kansas State,
1.38.
Okay. I wondered if some of the momentum Utah brought into the Big 12 might have gotten them some high viewership numbers, but maybe not.
Okay. The Utah schools in the Big 12 came in 3 and 4 in terms of viewership. Who do you think came in higher?
I'm gonna guess Utah because they had a little bit more momentum coming into the Big 12 football-wise than BYU did.
Utah averaged 1.35 million viewers per game. BYU 1.15 per game.
So pretty even.
So both of those teams would be beneficiaries of the popularity-based model.
Yeah.
Of course, Colorado would get the most. Kansas State second most. Utah third most. BYU fourth most. And the gap between them is not large, so presumably with BYU having a better season last year, maybe that number flips in 2025. But in either case, you're going to get an extra few $1 million a year for Utah and for BYU. Are you willing to do that, Big 12 football fans, Utah fans, BYU fans, at the expense of the other people in your conference? The answer is probably yes.
Yeah. Again, what makes it tougher is because of how close it is. If you're not Colorado, there's no guarantee you're that team getting the money every year because it's a year-to-year thing, or right? OC. So
yeah, it's the popularity based on that year.
Yeah,
it's television viewership. So like, let's say 2026. The 2026 season, ACC has adopted this model. 60% of revenue gets split up based on the popularity, and it's like Clemson, maybe Dabo retires.
Yeah.
And instead of them getting the biggest bump, an extra $15 million, maybe their viewership goes down to like 4th or 5th best because people don't like the new guy. Now they get $10 million instead of 15. That's what we're talking about.
It just feels like with ACC, if you're Florida State, if you're Clemson, to your point, as long as Dabo's there and they're making playoff runs and things like that, if you're Miami, it feels like you're almost guaranteed to get this every year. It doesn't feel the same in the Big 12, so
you know whose numbers?
But maybe the upside's good enough that you just go for it anyway.
You know whose numbers the most guaranteed in the Big 12? BYU's. BYU is never because of the church affiliation.
Yeah, they've got a good national following because of the church affiliation. Yeah.
And they're probably never going to be, even in a great year, they're probably never going to be number one because they're BYU, right? Because maybe the same reason. Because like some people are just like, I don't watch BYU because of that or whatever. Right now, Colorado, they're number one right now by a significant margin because of the Deion factor.
Yeah.
You take Deion away from this equation, Colorado's 10th. Here's where I have a hard time with it, right? This is all popularity based. This is not a performance based metric at all. This has nothing to do with how good your football team is. And I say that knowing full well that if you are distributing revenue based on like the wins and the losses and how good your season is, that means that Utah didn't get a big share this year, if that's your model.
Yeah, nowhere near a big share. Yeah.
Here's the thing that bothers me. Arizona State, 14th in ratings this year.
Wow.
They were the best team in the conference. They won the conference. They were fascinating. They had a great story. They played great in the playoff contest. Like, everything about Arizona State, if you're a college football fan, was appealing. 14th in ratings. 14 is them, 15 is Houston, 16 is Cincinnati. TCU, usually a really good team. Nobody watches TCU, dude. Yeah. TCU gets nothing in terms of television ratings.
They were an 8-win team. Like, they weren't.
TCU was 13th.
Yeah, they had a good season.
So based on the revenue model that the ACC is going to adopt, Kansas football is going to get a lot more than Arizona State football.
Yeah.
Utah football, I'm using it as an example. I know that this year was an outlier for Utah, but a 5-win Utah football team gets more money from the Big 12 conference than the conference champion. Even if it's benefiting my alma mater, I don't know if I love that. You know what I mean?
And in this hypothetical scenario right now, yeah. And I guess I'm less against it because it's media money. It's TV money, and ratings are the most important part of media money. So that's why I'm like, okay, well, that's how you earned that money. So it probably should be a popularity contest, even though I'm with you. I'm all for the meritocracy. But in this case, the merits of media money is the ratings and the popularity, unfortunately.
Yeah, which, I mean, unfortunately, you're not wrong, but unfortunately it's like whoever has the best branding, which right now is Colorado, gets the most money. And then we know how it works. The more money gets you better players, better coaches, hopefully more wins, and then you get more wins, and your branding gets even better. So that's where this is a dangerous model for the ACC. I'm trying to apply it to the Big 12, just letting you out there know what it would look like in the Big 12. Utah would get the third most money, so maybe you like it. BYU would get the fourth most, so maybe you like it. Or maybe you fear a time when Kyle Whittingham retires and suddenly people aren't quite as interested in watching Utah football anymore, and now they're the 8th most popular. So that year, instead of getting an extra $8 million in revenue, they get an extra $5 million in revenue, and now you're starting to go the wrong direction.
It's going to be much more fickle in the Big 12 than it would. It would be much more fickle applied to the Big 12 than I see it being, as it's about to be agreed to in the ACC. As what I said before, Florida State's always going to draw. Clemson, as long as they're winning, are going to draw. Miami's always going to draw. North Carolina's probably going to draw a ton. So there's not as much risk for those teams to agree to that in their conference as I see for Big 12 teams to agree to that in their conference.
All right. We're going to take a break. Scott Mitchell talked about this on his show. We'll touch on it again with him when he joins me next. It's the Sean O'Connell Show. ESPN 700, 92.1 FM, proud part of Utah's ESPN radio network.
Hey, Scott.
Sean O'Connell Show here on ESPN 792.1 FM. Hopefully you had a great weekend. Maybe watched a little Oscars action last night. Reminder to you, the Running Utes Coaches Shows tonight at 6, live from Slackwater, Salt Lake City, right here on your home of the Utes, ESPN 792.1 FM. Interim head coach Josh Eilert, his first coaches show. It's a big ask for Josh Eilert. Tune in at 6 to listen to what he has to say, coming off his first win as the Utah head coach. Scott Mitchell, kind enough to stop by on a Monday, as he is wont to do. Scott, welcome. How are you?
Oh, doing wonderful. I did not watch the Oscars. I don't know. I didn't even know the Oscars were on. But someone won, someone lost, and I don't know the movie that won. Is it a good movie?
I have no idea. I have not seen it. Actually, this is a good question here. All right, so there were 10 Best Picture nominees. 10. Scott.
Wow.
All right, which is way too many.
I can't count that high, but okay.
10 were nominated for Best Picture, okay? Emilia Perez, A Complete Unknown, Conclave, Nickel Boys, Anora, Dune Part 2, I'm Still Here, The Substance, Wicked, and The Brutalist. How many of those 10 have you seen?
I saw one.
Let me guess which one it was.
All right.
Dune Part 2.
Nope.
What?
Nope.
That's really good. It's good. You should watch it.
Oh, okay. I'll watch it. I didn't even see Dune Part 1.
Well, watch Dune Part 1 and then watch Dune Part 2.
Wicked. Okay, I saw Wicked.
You saw Wicked. All right.
Yes. I actually love Wicked.
Defying Gravity. You singing that when you drive around in your truck?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I sing that I'm popular.
That's a good one. That one is more fitting for you, actually.
Yes.
James, how many of those 10 have you seen?
I saw 2.
Okay. Which ones did you see?
Not Dune, because I, like Scott, need to see Dune 1.
Guys, what?
I know.
Dune
I
1
know
has
that's
been out for 5 years.
I know that's the most popular of the 10 is Dune 2 because of how good Dune 1 was, and I hear they're great books too. But anyway, did not watch Dune 2. Saw Conclave.
Okay.
Which I told you about, I think, after seeing it. It's about the election of a pope.
Yes,
anyway,
unfortunately, a real-life conclave may be happening sometime soon.
Yes.
Pope Francis is not doing well, but yeah.
But that one was really good, and I saw Wicked.
Okay. I
liked them both.
I saw Conclave. I watched it on an airplane. And then I saw Dune in the theater, which is great. It's a great movie. I have not seen Wicked. So I guess I've seen 2. Just those 2.
I think the ones that if you polled 100 people, most people have probably seen 4. Dune, A Complete Unknown, because that one was well advertised too, the Bob Dylan movie, and then Wicked, and probably just those 3. And Conclave, I'm saying because I saw it.
How about Timothée Chalamet is in 2 of those 10 movies? 20% of your Best Picture, he's in as the male lead. Good for him.
Did he win?
I don't know if he won. I didn't watch it, but I saw 10, and I was like, there is no way everyone's seen all 10 of these movies. If you're not in Hollywood, you have not seen all 10 of these movies. So I put up a poll question, and our listeners confirmed my bias. Right now, 3 or fewer, which is the last of the answers I provided that they could vote on, 89% of people have seen 3 of these movies or fewer. 4% have seen 4 or more. 6% have seen 7 or more. You got to be a real movie buff. Only 0.8% have seen all 10. I don't even believe you if you voted all 10.
See, you have to wonder if when they're nominated, then people go, oh, I need to go see it now. So they didn't go see it until it was at, because I'm like, well, maybe I want to see a couple of these movies because they were nominated, which I might or I might not do, but I think that has some. I don't think people are that affectionate about movies that they've seen that they've seen all of them or 7 or more.
I guarantee there were years when it was like 5 Best Picture nosaminees that I'd seen 4 of the 5, or that I, maybe even a year or two that I saw all 5 of the 5. Not now. Not the Oscars now are about rewarding weird artsy films for the most part. Not into it, Scott.
No, I'm right there with you. Like I said, I didn't even know it happened.
All right, we're not here to talk Oscars. We're here to talk all things football. You actually were talking about this on your show today. I've spent half an hour more on it. The ACC is settling the lawsuits with Clemson and Florida State, and they're adopting this revenue sharing model that is going to reward popularity. They're going to reward television ratings. Do you think this is a good model for the ACC? Do you think this is good for college football? Is this something that you could see the Big 12 jumping on board with?
Well, I think I wonder how much influence the demise of the Pac-12 had on this revenue sharing. I think that was one of maybe an argument or a silent argument that USC had. It's like, we're the poster child. Like we're the bell cow here. We're the one that, really makes things move. And we should have more. And I also mentioned earlier about college football is about money. And it was a sad day when I learned this, and it's been some time since. I mean, it wasn't like yesterday that I learned this. So that's what really moves the needle. And I think if you're going to be a relevant conference moving forward, because there's going to be further consolidation of things, and if it goes to 3 conferences or 2 conferences, the ACC and the Big 12 are the 2 that are going to be the most impacted by it. So the more you can make yourself relevant as a conference, the more you can keep your big name programs involved, engaged, and happy. I think the better off you are. And my suggestion was that Brett Yormark go out and be bullish like he did before. I mean, Big 12, when Oklahoma, Texas announced they were leaving, the Big 12 I thought was done. And he came in and did a remarkable job of kind of saving the conference and did a tremendous sell job on people. And I think you have to continue to evolve or you die in college football. And I'd go after these programs. I'd go after the big name program. I'd convince them to come to the Big 12. I might go after maybe Miami and maybe North Carolina, a couple of these other schools, and create more power, more panache in your conference, and than where you are. I mean, the Big 12 as it stands right now is, I don't know how sexy it is moving forward, but you get some of those bigger names. It certainly helps you when the money, when people want to negotiate money or want to make you relevant.
That is one of the things that was agreed upon here, that the buyout, which was previously around $120 million to leave the ACC before the expiration of the grant of rights, is now going to be under $100 million if they do want to leave. So part of this agreement, part of this settlement was, which is, I don't know why from an ACC standpoint you would agree to this. We're going to give you more money as our most popular teams, and we're also going to make it easier for you to leave. I mean, normally there's a little give and take. The fact that Clemson and Florida State and presumably Miami and North Carolina and the other popular teams got both a reduced buyout and more money is that's a win, it feels like, for the schools.
All I know is lawsuits, no one wins, right? And so figuring out a way to settle is a far better way. A solution and the compromise and things is far better than scorch the earth and we're gonna bring everyone down with us, and so there is some compromise, but it's still something. I mean, it's significant to get out of the conference. Again, if I'm the Big 12, I'm looking at how can I attract some of these schools, and whoever did that deal for the ACC really should be fired, like multiple times. We're going to have an Olympics in Utah before the grant of rights agreement is done with the ACC. I mean, this is a deal with the devil right there. Whoever did that was just absolutely stupid, simply because the landscape of college football has always been changing. It's always been changing, and it's not just a recent phenomena. I mean, you can go back decades and talk about the difference in these conferences, and where I mean, there was the SWAC conference that was a big deal, and it's I don't think it's around anymore, and the Big East used to be a conference, and it's gone, and so and that wasn't just yesterday; it was a while ago. So money's just going to continue to move the needle here, but you've got to have some flexibility if you're the ACC, moving forward. And I think it's an arms race between the Big 12 and the ACC about who actually is more relevant of the non-relevant conferences. And I think that will be a fun thing to watch moving forward, as we know this thing's going to continue to evolve. How and where it does, it remains to be seen, but it is something I firmly believe will happen.
Scott Mitchell for another couple of minutes here on the Sean O'Connell Show. The NFL Scouting Combine wrapped up over the weekend, and we talked about it when you joined me on the show last week. But one of the interesting things that has emerged, and who knows why it happens this way, but it seemed like heading into the Scouting Combine where Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders opted not to throw, and they gave their reasons, and everyone seemed to accept that was the right decision for them to make. It seemed like heading into this that they were kind of neck and neck, and that some teams were like, okay, we like Cam better, maybe a couple teams like Shedeur better. And coming out of this, now the consensus, or at least what is being reported, is that Cam is for sure the number one quarterback in this class, and Shedeur might be available at 6, 7, 8, 9 if you want to wait around for him. What happened at the Combine?
A lot of it is the interviews can have some sway. I've interviewed both of these players before, multiple times, at the Pac-12 media days, and I'll just tell you, in those interviews, I would tend to agree with what's being reported. I was more impressed with Cam Ward than I was Shedeur. But if Cam Ward comes out as the top quarterback, not necessarily meaning he'll be the top pick in the draft, it feels like probably won't. But he'll be maybe 2 or whatever. And so it looks like there's a possibility that Cleveland's going to get a quarterback. And you kind of go, I don't know, I want to be number one. Maybe Shedeur tanked the interviews, which other players have done, by the way. This is not, they didn't want people to draft him, so they purposely, gave bad answers because they're like, I don't want to go to your team. I want you to think I stink. And so, there can be a little bit of that going on. And I think if anyone understands the value of going to the right organization, it's certainly Deion Sanders, and knowing that it's imperative for his son to land in the right spot. And so, there could be some gamesmanship going on here. And maybe Cam Ward just goes, I don't care. I want to be the number one guy. I don't care where I go. You can think that way about it. And there's nothing wrong with that. But certainly, I don't tend to believe anything that I hear coming out of the Combine or before the draft. I think a lot of people like to generate speculation, and I think a lot of it is to kind of, if you're the Tennessee Titans, you're like, let's just kind of play the field here and kind of pretend like we don't know what we really want, and let's see if maybe people entertain offers. Maybe an offer might sound good to us, but we might get a sense of where other teams are really and what they really want in the draft and how they really value or have evaluated the draft so far. And so you get a lot of disinformation for a whole lot of reasons. So I'm if I'm a quarterback and I going down the draft order a little bit might not be the worst thing in the world for me if I'm a first round guy.
Do you remember what your hand measurement was when they took you to and were poking and prodding? And you got some big hands. I've shaken your hand before, Scott.
Here's the thing about my draft combine experience. It was so horrible. And I know I've said this before. I don't remember. The only thing I remember them measuring my hands. Oh, there are a couple things I remember. I remember them measuring my hands, and it wasn't a thing back then. All I knew is I could hold a football and throw it, and I had no issues. Right, like that wasn't ever a problem for me. So I didn't care. It was when they told me that I had both of my shoulders separated at some point in my life. That's what the X-ray showed. Like and I'm like, I've never had a shoulder separation. And because they were kind of mad. They were like, how come you didn't disclose this to us? When did this happen? I go, never. And they go, well, it could have happened when you were born coming through the birth canal.
And it's still showing up on your physical when you're 21 years old.
Right. So I remember that. And because I was like, I had no idea. And then the next thing was my entire life, from the time I was 15, I was 6 feet 6 inches tall. And when you get measured for your height, they squish you down. like you feel like you've been put in a vice. Like it's just like, and they're like, I mean, your ankles are together and they're up against the wall and your calves are touching the wall and your butt and your everything. I mean, and they push your head down and then they put the ruler on there and they go, you're 6'5 3/4. And it was like very precise and very accurate. And so I'm 6'5 3/4. Those are the only two things I remember. And Major Harris, who played at West Virginia, who worked out in his blue jeans, because we were working out outside and it was cold and he didn't have sweats. And he ran a 4.5 40 in blue jeans.
No, that can't be real.
It's just, I was there. I saw the whole thing.
In blue jeans?
We threw the ball, right? So it's like a 30-mile-an-hour wind. And and he threw the ball like 30 yards in the wind and threw it like 75, going with the wind. It was just crazy. Crazy day.
All right, last thing before I let you go. My beloved San Francisco 49ers reached a point where it was just irreconcilable differences with Deebo Samuel. And so he wanted a trade. They were like, all right, find a trade partner. We'll let you get a trade. They sent him to the Washington Commanders.
Yeah.
Now, what the hell are you doing? You can't give a rising team whose Super Bowl window is opening an asset when your Super Bowl window is closing. Like, go ahead, ship him to the Cowboys. Send him to a place that can't get it figured out. You don't trade a good player to a good team and get nothing back. They got a 5th-round pick back. They knew they weren't going to get anything back, which means you don't have to let the return compensation be the determining factor of the trade. You should be looking at this and saying, I don't want to send this guy somewhere he can hurt us. Instead, they sent him to a definitive playoff team for the next decade.
Well, it's a good example of where the 49ers were because of the quarterback situation, and they got a free ride as far as the salary cap. You got a really good quarterback and got him cheap and got him on a rookie deal. And so they could afford to have all these other players around. And now they have to make a choice. Is it Fred Warner or is it Deebo Samuel? Is it Brock Purdy or is it, so they have to, there's just certain players you just have to part with. And you just say, here's the nucleus, here's the untouchables, and here's the guys that in order for us to stay in budget, it's too much. And we got to move in a different direction. Now Washington goes, hey, we're like you were a few years ago. We have a quarterback who's playing really well on a rookie deal. And so we're going to make hay while we can. And we're going to go out and we're going to find the best deals and we're going to sign guys and we're going to make a serious run at this right now. And then we'll address things as we get down the road. And I think and even the Rams to some degree with Matthew Stafford, they could afford to pay him because they've drafted so well and they've had so much success through the draft. And so they're playing, when you get good players playing cheap, you can afford to spend some money other places. And the Rams might be in as good a position moving forward in the near future as really anyone. Now, how long Matthew Stafford stays and how healthy remains to be seen because he's 37, but he's probably got, he could have 3 or 4 good years, and 3 or 4 good years in the NFL is like a lifetime. So it's not so much. I feel your pain, and I think to some degree, I think teams try to do that where you don't want to, you don't want to necessarily trade them. In your conference is one thing, in your division's a little different. So not trading them to a division opponent sometimes is about the best you can do. With Saquon, where they just let him go and let him free, he kind of signed at the worst possible place for the New York Giants. But yeah, that's unfortunately what happens in a cap world is the teams that can make moves and make a shot at running now are going to do it, and they're going to find good players.
All right, Scott, got to cut you loose. Always appreciate your time, and
Always,
looking forward to the second hour of the Down and Dirty.
Hey, thank you so much. Yeah, take care, Sean.
That's Scott Mitchell. You can hear him right here on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM from 10 to 11, preceding my show, and then over on our brother station. I'm not going to tell you when because it's competing with my show, so I'm not going to advertise that for him. All right, sorry, Scott, not doing that. Tony Jones is going to join us next. By the way, our conversation with Scott, part of our Big 12 at noon coverage, brought to you by Mountainland Supply. Visit mountainlandsupply.com or visit one of their physical locations. Tony Jones next. Talk a little NBA basketball. It's ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM.
Yeah, Keontae goes back to work off the elbow, sends the ball, pumps, drives, hangs it up to Sheboy, puts it up, left hand. Nice score by the big.
Little Sheboy off a nice pass from Bryce Sensabaugh. Sound of the Utah Jazz, most often courtesy of our friends at Smith Entertainment Group Media. Craig Bowler-Jack on that call. Sheboy with 16 points, 13 rebounds on 8 of 9 shooting. On, James put this in the notes, on Oscars night. Coincidence? I think not. Jazz Pistons tonight, final game of a 9-game, 18-day homestand, longest in franchise history. Wow. Jazz insider, NBA insider from The Athletic, Tony Jones, kind enough to give us some time here on the Sean O'Connell Show today. Tony, welcome back. How are you?
Well, you're supposed to be like my close friend, Tony Jones. Like, we go back like quarter waters and annihilators, man. Come on, bro.
My close friend, Tony Jones, we went to elementary school together. No, not that far back.
Well, we didn't go back that far.
Not quite that far.
We go back to like 2010. And you're just like, yeah, Tony Jones is on here. Like, this is my first time ever talking to Tony Jones.
Well, this is the first conversation I've had with Tony in several weeks because I Little Bird told me you weren't feeling good. You on the mend? You good now?
I am good now. I had shingles, and it put me down for like 6 weeks.
Brutal.
It was terrible. It was brutal.
That's not good. Glad you're feeling better. Okay, so a 9-game homestand. Did the Jazz grow in good in positive ways in this 9-game homestand?
I would think so. I mean, I think they've grown in positive ways throughout the season. Just by playing, so many young guys, so many minutes, and this season is obviously not about wins and losses. In fact, I'll amend that. It's actually about losses. But it's also about development, and it's also about, fact finding and information gathering. And, I think that, there are several things that the Jazz, have kind of figured out as the season has gone on. Isaiah Collier has, emerged as a starting point guard. I think that, the Jazz realize now that, the way to use Keontae George is to put the ball in his hands and say, go score. And as opposed to putting the ball in his hands and saying, go score and go run the offense at the same time. I think that, they figured out that, he's much more of a scorer than, somebody who, can do both of those things. I think, Kyle Filipowski, finding so many minutes at the 4 and the 5, that's been a good thing because you can figure that out. You look at Cody Williams, who struggled so much, that the Jazz had to put him down in the G League for an extended period of time. But now that he's up and he's back up, he's playing a lot better and he seems a lot more comfortable. Just figuring all of those things out, and figuring out that Walker Kessler is probably a franchise level, not a franchise center in terms of, Joel Embiid or Nikola Jokic, but somebody, that, can really be built around. So just figuring all of that stuff out and finding all that stuff out. I mean, that's kind of what this season has been about. And I think that the Jazz, have been doing a good job of that in that vein.
With all of that sort of discovery that you're doing of these young players, how many of those guys and you just rattled through a bunch of them, how many of those guys are like, hey, he's here now, like forever. We're keeping this guy. He is part of the next time this team is good and is competing for the playoffs, it's because he is here. How many of those guys, I don't want to say untouchable because we learned nobody in the NBA is, and we'll get to that trade here in a little bit, but how many of the guys that you just mentioned, or how many guys maybe we didn't mention, are actual like Jazz building blocks?
The irony of that is, with all of that I said, I would say none of them.
Yeah, fair.
With the possible exception of Walker Kessler, I think that the next time that the Jazz are good, I think that Walker Kessler is 100% going to be on the team and playing a big role of that. Other than that, I think that, a lot of Isaiah Collier is popping. Like he's 88 assists away from breaking John Stockton's 40-year-old total assist record for a rookie in this franchise. That's not a small thing. That is a huge, huge accomplishment if Collier can make that, can do that. So we know that Collier can play at the NBA level. I think we know that Kyle Filipowski can play at the NBA level. I think the Jazz are still hoping that Cody Williams can play at the NBA level, but none of those guys have popped to the point where you're looking at them and like, okay, we know that guess what, we got to make moves for this roster because in 3 years we have to give this guy $150 million. None of those guys have popped to that degree, and that's and that's part of what the season is about, right? Like this season is about losing as many games as possible to put yourself in a position to either draft Cooper Flagg or draft Dylan Harper. And, I think that, those are the two guys that, everybody is in agreement that those are the franchise guys in this upcoming draft. And the Jazz are trying to get a guy that they know is going to be a franchise guy. So, I think that that's the flip side in all of this is that, even with, the fact gathering and the discovery, the guy is not on this roster. The guy is definitively 100% not on this roster, and the Jazz know that they have to figure out a way to get the guy.
Beyond those two draft prospects that we have paid so close attention to, how big is the gap between Harper and like an Ace Bailey or a VJ Edgecombe or whoever you think is that the lead horse in that next tier? How big is that gap?
So it's interesting because, I think the first two guys are about, figuring, the lack of weaknesses. Like Cooper Flagg doesn't have a real discernible weakness. Maybe his one weakness is you can't give him the ball in the last 5 minutes of a game and expect him to take over a game. So in that sense, even though he's probably a guy who you're projecting as a number one franchise guy, he's a little bit unorthodox in that way. And, Dylan Harper, maybe, he's 6'6", but, maybe because of the fact that he's not great athletically, maybe you can see some floor there, like there's a floor there. So, but everybody else is, a real crapshoot. So if you put, VJ Edgecombe, you put Ace Bailey, you put Kasparis Yakachunas, you put Trey Johnson, you put Con Kneppel, you put all those guys in a hat. One of those guys are really going to pop, right? But you don't know. And, so that's what makes that next group a little more flighty because you have to figure out which of the guys is going to pop. And for me, in my opinion, if I had to bet on one, I'd bet on VJ Edgecombe because I think he's the guy that's improved the most out of that group from November until now. He's the guy who plays the hardest on both ends of the floor, and his athleticism is stunning. And, when you project him getting into NBA spacing and you project him, the ability to get to the basket in a college setting where, there's no spacing, especially in Baylor, where none of his teammates can shoot the ball. So he's seeing the zone all of the time, and he's still getting to the basket. I've spoken to GMs that think that VJ Edgecombe has a chance to be another Dwayne Wade. Now, I don't know that that's going to be true, but I do think that, out of that next group, that's the guy that I would be betting on.
We are all prisoners of the March Madness moment in basketball because it's for a lot of folks when you actually tune in and watch these people diligently. How much is the NBA influenced by what somebody does in the tournament, because some of these guys, like Edgecombe's, he's on a bubble team right now, and obviously Flag's playing for a 1 seed, so the prognosis looks a little bit different for each player. But how much does the NBA care?
I don't think they care a whole heck of a lot. I mean, I saw Ben Simmons get drafted number 1 when he played for an absolutely horrible LSU team. And, that team didn't play very hard all year. And, this Rutgers team is absolutely terrible. And Dylan Harper's going to go number 2. And, Ace Bailey is going to go probably no lower than number 6. So I don't think that it'll hurt you. I do think it'll help you. Like I've seen, like Johnny Juzang on that Final Four team in UCLA, he should have came out that year. And if he had come out, he would have been a first-round pick. Went back to school and ended up not being a first-round pick. I've seen guys, go on, huge runs over the years, all the way back to Glenn Rice in Michigan, going on a huge run and being in the top 5 of the draft. And, Sean Higgins from that same Michigan team, who was probably undrafted going into that March Madness, hit a bunch of shots, ended up a first-round pick. Now, flamed out in the league, but, had, this irrational run of, making every shot that he put up and became a first-round pick. So I think that it can help you. I don't think that it's going to hurt you. Like if a team, if the NBA is sold on you, it's not going to matter, if your college basketball team is 8-20. If they're sold on you, you're still going to get drafted, really high. But I do think that it can help you. I think that you can go into March Madness, and I think that you can, go on a 4 or 5 game run of being great, and I think that can help your draft stock for sure.
Tony Jones, for just another minute or two, talking NBA hoops. Let's focus on a trade you and I have not had an opportunity to discuss yet. The blockbuster, the craziness, the thing that we're going to be talking about, I think, for years. Luka to the Lakers. We have not gotten your thoughts, at least not on the air. So is this going to work out? Is this going to be what everyone says it is? The shifting of the next face of the franchise and the league in some ways goes from LeBron. He passes the torch to Luka. Luka takes off running with it. Or is there some merit to what Dallas wanted to do in getting out from under a Supermax contract and a guy who I guess likes to drink too much beer?
Well, I think 2 things are true. I think that Dallas's worry about Luka was well warranted. I don't think Luka's taking care of his body. I don't think Luka's been as professional as he could be. And that being said, there's just no way you trade Luka Doncic. That's one of the best 3 players in the world. And now you certainly don't trade him to the Lakers. The Lakers might win a championship this year. Like, they're that good. I know it's what they're saying, they need a center and Jackson Hayes is a center and this and that. They've got Luka, and LeBron's been one of the best 5 players in the league this year. He should be 100% first-team All-NBA this year. They've got 2 of the best 5 players in the league. And, and not only that, they're of like-minded. Like, you've given Luka another Luka, and you've given LeBron another LeBron. You've got 2 supercomputers and all-time playmakers on the same team, and they are surrounded by a plethora of defensive wings who can also shoot the basketball. And also, Austin Reeves has developed into a killer offensively. The Lakers might come out of the West. I think they're the second best team in the Western Conference. And if they do come out of the West, if they get the right matchup in the finals, they might win it. And if that happens, you got to fire Nico Harrison, like, on the spot. Like, you just don't give Luka Doncic to the Los Angeles Lakers. If you want to trade Luka Doncic, then guess what? You get as much as you can for him, and you open it up. You tell the Jazz, and the Jazz trade all the picks for him, or you tell Oklahoma City or somebody else, and they trade all the picks for him. You gave Luka Doncic. I know you got back Anthony Davis, but you only got back one first-round pick. The Jazz got more. The Jazz got more for trading Rudy Gobert than the Dallas Mavericks got for trading a prime Luka Doncic. So, I mean, you know, in the back channels, you know, I've talked to teams, I've talked to executives. The league is furious. The league is absolutely furious that this trade went down. And, you know, it gave the Lakers another lifeline. It gave the Lakers another timeline. You know, they gave Luka to LeBron at a time that LeBron, even at the age of 40, is still playing at a super duper star level. And, you know, this year or next year, the Lakers might win a championship. So, you know, even with all of Dallas's misgivings, even with Nico Harrison's strained relationship with Luka, even with, you know, the fact that Luka hasn't taken care of his body, that, you know, he likes hookah and he likes beer, you still don't trade a guy that good to the Los Angeles Lakers. It's just, you know, the league as a whole is furious about that, and you know, it's something that I don't know that Nico Harrison is ever going to recover from.
I agree with everything you just said. I'm also curious about whether or not Jimmy Butler keeps a Warriors championship window open, like maybe just props it open a little bit. I know that he's not Luka. I know that he's older, but you know they're trying to keep the dynasty like on life support. Is Jimmy Butler going to help that effort in Golden State?
He obviously helps some because, you know, they're obviously 6-1 when he steps on the floor. I would greatly caution to say that 6-1 has been against the bottom of the league. I think that we really need to see Golden State play against some really good teams to accurately judge how much he helps. Now, that being said, the Warriors have a really easy schedule down the stretch, and I think that they're going to cruise into the sixth spot of the playoff race and be able to make the playoffs outright. And it makes them a dangerous team, especially in the right matchup, because, you know, Jimmy Butler in a playoffs, motivated, you know, is still a very, very, very good basketball player. Stephen Curry, you know, he has belief again, you know, so he's kind of turned it up. And, you know, they, you know, a lot like the Lakers, they found, you know, some really good players, you know, off the beaten path. You know, the Santos kid, you know, people like that. You know, obviously Brandon Podziemski. You know, obviously Draymond Green is still there. They're going to get Jonathan Kuminga back from injury pretty soon, perhaps tonight against the Warriors. Against the Charlotte Hornets. You know, so they're for certain an improved version of what they were earlier this season, where they had no belief. And I think that, you know, that's the biggest thing that Jimmy Butler has given the Warriors. Now they have belief that they can win on an elite level, and that in itself makes them a dangerous team. So I think they need to avoid the Lakers. I think that's a terrible matchup for them. But if they get somebody like the Denver Nuggets, if they get somebody like the Memphis Grizzlies, if they get somebody like the Houston Rockets, I think that they're going to be as dangerous as any to go out there and win a playoff series.
Tony, I could pick your brain all day, but we're up against it. Glad you're feeling better. Thanks for your time, as always.
My God, thank you for having me, and thanks to James Peterson for for spam texting me and making sure that I come on the show. I appreciate y'all.
I not as much as I appreciate that. Well done, James. We need some Tony Jones, more of it. Thank you, Tony. Great stuff as always. All right, James, do we want to take a single break here and come back with a tank race update, or you want to double it and actually stay on time for Tyson Ewing?
We should probably stay on time.
All right.
We're all good with that.
We will get to the tank race update at some point on the show. It's the Sean O'Connell Show. Tyson Ewing is going to join us next. You're listening to ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM, proud part of Utah's ESPN radio network.
Game clock down to 12. Here's Delaney Gibb on the right side, crossing back to her left from her right. Driving, losing the basketball, stolen away. Maddie Wilkie with 4, down to 2. She'll heave at the buzzer. She got it! She got it! Maddie Wilkie buries it from 45 feet, and Utah wins the rivalry game!
You have to love it. An incredible call on the buzzer beater. Half-court shot. Senior day, overtime, rivalry game. I mean, it's all of the things that you need for the epic sports movie recipe. 76-73, the final. That sound courtesy of Utah Sports Radio Network. Tyson Ewing on the call. Utah women are a 6 seed in the Big 12 basketball tournament. First game will be Thursday night at 7. Calling that game will be our friend Tyson Ewing, the voice of Utah women's basketball, whose voice was very enthusiastic on that call. Tyson, welcome back to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well.